right, welcome everyone. Let's get started. My name is Mark Seefts. I'm Senior Director of Software Development for Oracle Apex. I manage the Apex development team. And today's webinar is about what's new in Flows for Apex 24.1. We have Niels de Bruin and Richard Allen here with us today to walk us through these new features. Flows for Apex is an open source framework for running workflow in Apex. Before we get started with that, I have a few general announcements. And if you have any questions throughout this webinars, please post them in the Q&A. You're welcome to introduce yourself on the chat, but any questions, please post them in the Q&A window. All right, let's start with some announcements and updates. First off, the Apex blogs, blogs.oracle.com/apex. You'll find all our recent and then previous blog postings there. There's one written by Mike Hitchwa, our SVP on Oracle Apex Generative Development. So go check it out at blogs.oracle.com/apex. And then we have a few more office hours coming up this year. There's unlocking template components coming up in 2 weeks. Template components have been a big focus for us over the last 2 or so releases of Apex. So join us in 2 weeks to learn more about how you can use template components in your applications. And then 2 weeks after that, on November 7th, we will have the next office hours on building low-code SaaS application app extensions with Oracle Apex. We've talked about that a lot at Cloud World this year in Las Vegas, which was in September. So we've shown there how you can use Oracle Apex to extend Fusion applications. And we'll do a webinar on this in about a month. So join us on November 7th on building low-code SaaS app extensions with Apex. And then yet another one in November. This is about some CI/CD advancements in Apex using SQL/CL projects. That's also a topic that we covered at Cloud World as well as at Kscope a couple of months ago at this point. So join us on November 21st to see how that is working. And you can look up all the scheduled office hours at apexoracle.com/office hours. There's also an Apex office hours in Spanish coming up on October 17th. And then if you missed any of our office hours, you can always go to apexoracle.com/office hours or go/playlist and watch past recordings. This goes back a couple of years. The most recent once we were serious on Apex 24.1, we had 4 office hours over the summer introducing all the new features, including AI features that we've introduced with 24.1. Then we have a few upcoming and ongoing conferences. There's a tour going on in India right now, Apex Utsav 2024. This goes from September 27th through October 26th. So take a look at this URL right here to see if any events are coming up in your area. Then on October 22nd, we have the Spanish Oracle User Group in Madrid and the East Coast Users Conference in the US on November 4th and 5th. You can always go to apexoracle.com/go/events to learn more about upcoming events. And there's more. There's the Polish Oracle User Groups from November 11th till the 12th. And also the Oracle Apex Tour in Latin America, Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay from November 21st till 26th. You'll find all the links here in the slides. And again, go to apexoracle.com/go/events to find information about all the upcoming conferences. And again, if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A section of Zoom. And if you have any deeper questions that need some more investigation, please go to apexoracle.com/forum. You can always post your Apex questions there. The community is very active there, helping everybody else, and our own team is there as well. So if you have any questions that are outside the scope of this office hours, please go to apexoracle.com/forum. All right, with that, again, I would like to introduce Niels de Bruin and Richard Allen. Both have been working on Flows for Apex for several years, and they're going to introduce us to what's new in Flows for Apex 24.1. So I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to you guys.
Thank you, Mark, for your kind words. Welcome, everybody, to Flows for Apex 24.1. We released it today, and Richard and I will take you through the new features of this new release. And before we do that, I would like to speak a little bit in general about this release, as I might imagine that some of you are not familiar with Flows for Apex as such. So Flows for Apex is an enterprise-grade process engine that runs completely in the Oracle database. That can be 19C or higher. And it requires you to have Oracle Application Express 22.1 or higher. It can be installed in your Apex workspace within minutes. That includes also apex.oracle.com. And just be aware that when you install it, by default, the English language version is being installed. So if you would like to have other languages installed as well, just go in the app to Shared Components, Application Translations, and there you can then publish the required languages you would like to have in Flows for Apex as well as additionally. We support the BPMN 2.0 industry standard. And we also ship you with additional Apex apps expense claims. We did that in the past with previous releases already, but also the simple process starter app, which is new in 24.1, and I will give a demonstration later on. Yeah, thank you for your huge interest in Flows for Apex. We have already received over 10,000 downloads in the last 4 years, so we've seen a great uptake. Lots of customers are using it in production. Some customers even have thousands of instances running with Flows for Apex. So that's already a great achievement. So it's a real honor to work on this community project with the other guys. And yeah, let's see what is new. One thing we've done also with 24.1 is firstly that we have a community edition and an enterprise edition. So the community edition, as you're used to, is completely free. It's open source. You can download it from our website today, flowsforapex.org. And Richard will demonstrate the features of the enterprise edition later on in this session. There might be a few of you that might be a little bit confused. Well, there is Flows for Apex. There is also a thing called Apex Workflow within Apex. So to clarify on that point, there is a great blog post being written by Ralf Müller of the Apex team. So you can see the QR code and the URL here. Just follow that, and then you have a great readout to see the comparison and the differences between the two. In general, I would say that as we are BPMN based, it has some advantages. So for instance, you could have a process modeler doing the process modeling as such without having to have any knowledge about Apex as such. And then you can hand over his work to an Apex developer who can then implement the steps in the process model. Another advantage would be leveraging large language models. As we are BPMN based, BPMN is eventually XML specification. And text, as we all know, is something a large language model can work perfectly with. And we will see later on, as Richard will demonstrate, some various use cases combined with a large language model, how you can take advantage of that. So when talking about the community edition of 24.1, those new features listed here, we have now already available for you to use. I would like to give a demo around these, and we'll start off first with the simple form and the simple process starter. For that, I'm switching here to my local instance of Flows for Apex 24.1. And we have added actually a new entry here called Simple Form Templates. Now, before I start the demonstration, I would like to point out that the general idea here of the simple form and also the simple process starter is to easy things up. Yeah. So before you had the possibility to create a process model, and you can still do so. And then afterwards, you would create your own data model. You would create your own custom app. And then you would use our process plugins to do back and forth communication between our process model on one side and your custom app on the other side. And that's where we had the idea to make things more easier, saying, okay, what if you don't need any data modeling anymore? What if you don't need a custom app anymore? You can just specify your process with the various steps in between. And if some of those steps are in user tasks requiring you to enter data, without any Apex know-how and any coding, you could actually set that up and start and walk through these processes. And that's something we exactly wanted to do with a simple form and the simple process starter app. So what started off as an idea is now actually becoming a reality with Flows for Apex 24.1. So what are the steps I need to undertake to get that up and running? So let me give you a small example of this. Let's first create a template. And let's say we have a supplier entry form I would like to create here. So I'm going to create a static ID. And first I'm going to leave the JSON field empty, just create a row and open it up again. So here you can see there's an entry possibility for JSON. And of course, I don't want you to enter, having to enter any JSON here. Yeah? So for that, we have created a simple form builder. And the simple form builder is able to generate the required JSON you can put in here. So there are multiple ways to do this. One of them is clicking on this link, and that will open up the cloud version. The cloud version won't let you save the definitions. Yeah? So you're bound to an Apex session. As soon as you lose your Apex session, that will then also lose all your data. So it's a great way to start working with it. But if you would actually want to save your definitions, I would recommend clicking on the GitHub repository and then download the local app and install it. It's a package app, and you can then install it in your local workspace environment. That's something I did here as well before. So I have the JSON simple form builder here installed. I can start it here, and I can click here on create a new form. So let's, as we wanted to create a supply entry form, let's enter that. And the supply entry form might have two fields. So in this case, I'm going to have a string. It's a required field. I'm going to add another field here. Let's say industry, which is also of type string. And once I click on Save Form Definition, I can immediately click here on Show Form, and that will actually display the form itself. So in this case, I have two fields, name and industry, and I can also see the required JSON to build up this form. So this JSON can then later on be copied over in Flows for Apex. So I'm not quite pleased with this setup. Maybe I would like to have the fields below each other. So let's work on that. First, the name. One way to achieve this is to set the call span to 12. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm going to save that definition. I'm going to show the form again. And right now I have the fields across the whole screen and also below each other. Maybe my industry field, I would like to have it presented as a list of values. So for that, I'm going to click on industry and add a new property for it. So in this case, the enumeration. And I want to allow a blank space, maybe retail, maybe bank, maybe insurance, and then save the definition again. By clicking on Show Form, I can now see that I have a list of values with the appropriate values in there. If you need help with these properties, we added also help section here for each property. So you can have a quick look up, what does this property do, and what can I actually enter in as a value here. So it's pretty much self-explaining. We have also possibilities to chain different kinds of forms as well. So you might have like an address form you would like to incorporate in a different form. So that's something you would do over here. But right now I'm happy the way it is. So I'm going to copy over this to my clipboard, go back to my application again. the supplier entry. I'm going to enter in the JSON. So in this case, I'm now ready with my form definition, but I don't have a process yet. So next step would be to create a process. And as we are talking about supplier entry, I will stick with the same name here. And right now there is here a button called Modify Diagram, and now I can start working with BPMN 2.0. So in this case, I will have a start event, I have some task, and maybe an end event. It can be whatever you want, of course, but I will stick with a very simplistic demo in this case. So in this case, I will have the supplier entry form in this task. First of all, I would like to have the process startable. And secondly, this task should be of type user task, because I want somebody to enter information in here. Before 24.1, you had the possibility to choose Apex page or do an Apex approval. And with 24.1, we have added now Apex simple form to the mix. So when selecting that, I can then fill out the details. And as you might have then installed already the simple process starter app, of course, you can also use a custom app if you would like to and choose that app. But what we require with the simple form is an Apex app that has a page in there that uses the JSON plugin. And that's already been set up with the simple process starter app. So once you have installed the simple process starter app, which is, by the way, also part of the software distribution, you can then immediately choose that app over here, choose the page where the JSON plugin is on, click on Generate Default Items. That will ensure that the context of the Flows for Apex step is being passed on to the Apex application. Form template item, pick the one with the same name, and then enter here the form you would like to have. So in this case, I would like to have the supplier entry form. So all those steps I did here are all the time the same, no matter what kind of form you have, as long as you want to start and walk through it with the simple process starter, then you're good to go with these settings. So what really matters here is the form you would actually like to display. There's one setting here that's required as well, and that's actually the authorization. So who is able to execute this task? And for that, I have in the application simple process starter, I have an Apex role being set up, and that's called admin. So if the user is part of that Apex role, admin, it has the possibility to execute this task. So now change save the changes over here, and now we can actually switch over as an end user using the simple process starter app. And here I have a point called My Processes. And with this button, Start Process, I can see all the processes which I am allowed to start. So also my supplier entry we've just added is now listed here. I can see the definition over here. And once I'm happy starting it, I can click on Start Process again, and it's now running. I can always have a look here at where it's at. So the viewer plugin will show me that I'm now need to enter more details for this user task. And by clicking on my tasks, I can now see that I need to do something. So this my tasks menu entry here lists all the tasks of all the applications in my workspace where I have to act upon. That can be a simple form, that can be an approval process, that can also be an Apex page. In this case, it's a simple form. So let's click on the title, and I'm having here now my simple form displayed with the two fields I previously defined. But I can also click on process status, and there in my process model, I can click here on this link, and then I also have the initial form here. So in this case, I'm going to say food incorporate, and that's from the industry retail. Click on apply changes, and now I'm done with the user task, and the whole process comes to an end already. So you might think, okay, where did my data go to? And we have, with the simple process starter app, we have supplied one table, and application administrators have the possibility to have a look at that table. And there you can actually see stored in JSON the entries I've just entered. So for those of you, and of course you can click here also to see it in a dialog as well. For those of you that want to do further data processing, of course you have the possibility using the standard SQL mechanisms in the Oracle database to do so. So in this case, I can also execute in SQL Workshop this query, but it won't return me the values. And that's because I'm looking in the JSON construct for an address and their street, but there is no address and no street. So in this case, there is in the JSON construct, there's a name and there is an industry. Of course, I would like the header to match those two fields. And when clicking on run, I can now see the values here. So it's a pretty powerful mechanism here to start off your processes and walk through all the tasks you might have that are listed here on my tasks, and then do further data processing based with standard SQL on the JSON data. There's one other point here in this navigation menu called process trigger. Upon installing the simple process starter, we deliver you also a pre-installed process called order. And this has already a form matched with that process. Now, what does that mean? The best way to look at it is to actually start one. So let's have a look at my processes. Click on Start Process. And if I was to select the order pre-installed process, then you can see that I don't have only a process listed here, but to kick off this process, I first need to enter a form. So and that can happen multiple times, right? So you cannot model that such a situation, but using the simple process starter, you can say to start off this model, you actually have to enter a form first. So, and this assignment is being done by using the process trigger. Okay, so far, simple form and simple process starter. Play around with it after installing Flows for Apex. And I would like to address some other features that we've added. So we have enhanced also our sample flows application. That's the expense claims. So the diagram itself didn't really change, but previously we had multiple user tasks in here of type Apex page. And what we did with 24.1 is we changed the task type to Apex approval. So you can see how an Apex approval now works. And we also changed the task type here to Apex simple form. So we have also added the simple form for the expense claims demo. Another smaller feature we've added is the use of a process variable of type JSON object. That's now new. For those of you that are not familiar with process variables, you can compare those with Apex application items, but they are long-lasting. They are persistent. So an Apex application item is lost once you close the Apex session, and this is not the case with a process variable. And as a process might span multiple days or even months, it's very important to have this persistent. And that you can do in various kinds of data types, this storage. And one of them we added here is now the JSON storage type. Another feature is that we have added coloring for BPMN elements. So you can now nicely color here, various kinds of elements. And the best way to show a great usage of this is in the example tutorials that also get pre-installed with Flows for Apex. Let me show you the full Monty one, which is quite big. You don't have to really understand what's happening here. It doesn't really have a business meaning, but it outlines all the BPMN elements we support as a BPMN engine. So this diagram over time gets bigger and bigger, of course. And to group the various kinds of elements, we have used coloring here. So the whole messaging part is in blue. The whole gateway part is in red. All the various task types are here in some kind of orange. And so forth. Yeah. So in this case, sub-processes, call activities are outlined in green. So that gives you an idea how you could use BPMN coloring. It's actually quite nice as a feature. So, and with that, I would like to move over to Richard, who will then start telling us about the Enterprise Edition features. Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you, Niels. So what I want to do now is talk about the features that we're putting into the Enterprise Edition. But before I do that, let me just back up and talk very briefly about the Enterprise Edition. The project has been going on for 4 years now with a lot of volunteer work and quite a bit of support from various companies, including Oracle and MT, now Hyand, and Insum and Solicon and FlowQuest. But as we came into this year, we needed to make two things, really. The project has become quite big. So doing this just on a volunteer basis in spare time is really quite difficult. And to make the project viable and to help the customer, we now have companies that are doing big things with Flows for Apex. And so we wanted to be able to provide support for them and to carry on developing the product. And so the answer to that has been to create the Enterprise Edition, which will have additional functionality and come with support on an annual subscription basis. In 24.1, we're starting that additional functionality. We've added support for iterations and loops in BPMN, which makes modeling a lot simpler. We have finished off the work we started with message flow and process collaboration. And we've done some work with generative AI to help the modeling process and the modeler. So let's talk about the first of those and talk about iterations. On the first, BPMN iterations in loops. In a process, sometimes you have a task or maybe a sub-process that you want to execute multiple times, typically once for each item in a list. So for example, if you had a stock taking process and then you end up with a list of items that need to be reordered, maybe you need to go through the reordering process once for each item that you found you needed to replace stock for. And so you were able to do this by creating a loop using this sort of logic where you create your own loop in the workflow, but it's not really a great way of doing it. It sort of works for sequential loops, but it's not great for doing things in parallel. And BPMN does provide the capability to do this. If you've played with the BPMN modeler, you may have noticed these little marks that sit there as options on items. We can either run a task in parallel, so we can make multiple copies of this task in parallel. The way to remember that is there are 3 L's in parallel, and those are the 3 L's. We can run them sequentially, so we run the task multiple times, or we can run it as a loop until some end condition occurs. So having set the scene, let's have a look at that in a process model. And so in this first case, what I'm doing is I have a process step where I create a list, and I'm using a process variable of type varchar, and I'm just making a colon delimited list by selecting these employees into that list, and then this task A2, which I'm going to do multiple times, I'm telling it to use that list, and for every item in the list, it will do A2 one time, and this is sequentially. So the first time when I step into A2, I will set this process variable ename to the first value in the list, Smith. I will do step A2. I'll then set ename to Jones. I'll do the process again, and so on until I get to the end of the list when I go on to step A3. In this next example, then I'm creating a JSON array in the step before. I'm using the new process variable type. I can do a query here, and each column that's returned ends up being an item in the JSON object, and I've got an array of those. So when I go into B2, this time my iteration is being driven from the emp array variable, and so I'll get a process variable called name for Smith and name for an emp number with that employee number the first time I do it. Second time, I'll create process variables for Jones with his employee number. And these will be set up in parallel as parallel tasks. In this third case, I'm not setting up a variable in advance. Instead, I'm going to drive the iteration directly from a query. And so here, the C2 is iterating over a query. And so for each row that's returned by the query, C2 will execute once. And each of the columns in the query will become a process variable in the array, in the iteration. And so I can now have tasks that are executed once for every record that's returned in a query set. Additionally, I can create a completion condition on this. And I have access to the number of times that the instances have succeeded or failed or had errors, as well as other process variables. And so I can create a condition, and when C2 is executed successfully 3 times, then it will any other iterations that are set up will be terminated, and we'll move on to C3. So this is a completion condition. And then in my final case here in purple, then I've just got a straightforward loop that doesn't have an input condition because it's a loop, and it just executes repetitively until some completion condition is met. And this makes it much easier to model processes that happen on sets of objects. Now, in this example, the thing that I'm iterating every time is a task, but I can also iterate sub-processes, in which case a whole bunch of things happen for each item in the input collection. And sometimes I can even nest, I could nest sub-processes, iterating sub-processes inside iterating sub-processes. And the engine is quite happy with that, but it gets quite hard for the administrator and the user to see what's happening if things go wrong. So what we've done is to make the process viewer iteration aware. So here I have a workflow that has a simple task, and then it has a task that is a sub-process, which we're going to execute in parallel. And if I drill down into the sub-process, and this is going to happen once for every row in depth. So this is going to happen 4 times. And then that sub-process, so I open it up, is going to do something for the employees in the department. So this is then going to happen once for each employee in the department. So you can see I'm fairly soon going to have quite a lot of tasks open. You know, in the real world, this is not a problem. These may be allocated to different people, and lots of people have to do this to complete the whole task. That's fine. It's just you know, more difficult to visualize what's going on. So maybe these are the things that happen for each employee. So let's start this process and just see how it works. So we've got to the first step, and we've now got 4 of these sub-processes executing in parallel. And let's step forward on the employees in the sales department. And you can see now I've got quite a few tasks going. And so if I want to drill down and use the process viewer to understand where we are. So let's drill into departments. And the first question is like, which department do we want to drill into? So now we can select the department in the viewer. And so now we're looking at the progress on department 30, on the sales department. And then I can drill into there and then see the progress on the tasks that were for Ward as an employee in Department 30. So I hope that's not a confusing demo. The idea of these tools is to make it simpler to understand iterations, which I think it does. And you can now visualize what's going on there. So and this whole feature gives you a lot of flexibility for implementing, you know, real world problems where you need to do things on groups of records or you know, groups of information. So the next feature I want to move on and talk about is messaging and process collaboration. So we introduced some of this in 23.1 with the ability for tasks in one process to be able to communicate via BPMN message flow to tasks in another process using send task, receive task, and message catch and throw events. And that was useful in some circumstances, but it became obvious fairly quickly to us that we needed to do the full message flow implementation, where a message can start a remote process. So that's a message start event, where a process that ends can send a message saying that it's finished, and where you can have message boundary events, where an incoming message can either interrupt or create a new path on both a task, a sub-process, or a call activity. And so in this feature, we've now implemented all of the BPMN features for message flow. So we support message send, message catch. So send and receive can be tasks, or they can be throw and catch events. Probably in general better to use events. We can have message start events. So when a message gets sent from this process to here, it starts up a whole separate business process here. And in this situation, to make it easy for a demo, I've got all three processes in the same diagram, all running on the same Apex instance. And you will have internal processes that start other internal processes in the same Apex instance. But these could equally be REST calls to another company, another organization. And the idea with BPMN message flow is that you are coordinating these different business processes using formatted messages, sending real-world keys like purchase order numbers and sales order numbers, not with some magic synthetic GUI GUID that ties everything together. So let's just see how that works. Let's just start this process. And you can see the customer here, he sent the purchase order. Now he's waiting to receive a sales order back from the supplier. If I connect here, I can see that the supplier process started, and he's now got a task to prepare an order. So let's complete that. That sends the message to the other process, and he's now got this task to complete. If I just go back quickly to the customer, you can see that he received that message. He's now got this task. He does that task and is now waiting for a delivery note to come from the supplier. If I go to the supplier, he was here preparing the goods. If I step that forward, he sends shipping instructions to shipper. Shipper gets a message which he uses to start a new process. He does that. He's now going to send the delivery instructions to the customer, send the delivery and the confirmation to the supplier. If we look at the supplier, you can see that he received that message and then sent the invoice to the customer. And if we go back to the customer where this whole thing started, you can see that those messages were both received and his process entered as well. So you can see how now we can coordinate processes across organizations and implement some process automation using a BPMN message flow. Now, if the details of that seem a little bit complicated, that's a good segue to our next feature, which is what we've done to support, to use Gen AI in the process here. And in this release, we are using Gen AI really to help the modeling process rather than the process execution side, which we will look at later. So the first thing I can do is I can ask Gen AI for some help. I don't quite understand this model. But it turns out that because BPMN is an XML standard, or because BPMN is a standard, it's written in XML. Standards are published. There are many conference papers written by many consultants over the last 15 years on BPMN and what's good practice. And all of this has been used to train the current generation of large language models. And so they're pretty good at understanding BPMN models. We don't send the entire model to the LLM to reduce the number of tokens. So we optimize what we send to the model. But the AI is quite good at explaining this process. In business English, we've told the modeler that it's a business analyst who understands BPMN, and so we can get summaries and explanations. And if you dig in here and ask for more explanation, then it's able to do that. One example here for the message flow that I had, where it's quite useful, is to ask for assistance in all of the structure of all these messages that are being passed. So what are the message headers and the payloads being sent with the payload, with the purchase order and the sales order and the delivery confirmation? So here the engine is able to show us the message names and the correlation keys and values and the payloads that are being sent in this example, to make this whole thing work. And you can see the output of this is in the documentation for Flows for Apex 24.1. You can see a version of this. So that's pretty useful. The next thing that we've done with LLMs is to look at error detection in models. Now, Niels showed you what we call the full Monty, which is the big model that's got one of everything in it, and you can see how if you have something of that size or that complexity, it's maybe hard to see what's going on. This is actually based on a real customer issue that I had a few months ago, where the model started off being an inclusive gateway. So this can, when it gets to here, either B can happen or C can happen, or both B and C can happen. And the rules for parallel gateways or inclusive gateways is that you can't loop from the middle of a parallel section back to before the parallel gateway, because otherwise it's very hard to get the model to close. And when it's drawn as a simple model like this, it's quite easy to understand what the problem is and what's gone wrong. But when you have a more complex model and it's been drawn to make sense in a business way, then maybe it's not quite as easy. But the AI is quite good at not only finding the fault, and we could have written SQL and PL SQL to find faults, but the nice thing about doing this with AI is that it's much better at explaining what the problem is and how you fix it. Here it's telling us that we've got a problem with looping outside of parallel paths, and what we need to do to fix it. And what you've probably noticed what we've done is actually put in two different AI engine, or two AI chatbots in here. One which has been told it's an error checking and a BPMN expert, and the other is told it's a business analyst. And they give slightly different versions of things. I would show you one more example here. So imagine you're on support and it's midnight it's the middle of your day, it's midnight in Asia. The call has rolled through to your time zone and you're trying to help somebody with this business process. Now, some of you may be able to read this and make perfect sense of it. My Japanese is not good enough to be able to read this. One of the nice things I can do with BPMN is to have the engine explain this process to me in my language. And so here it is. It's giving us the Japanese from the model in kanji. It's also giving us the Japanese in a way that we can pronounce it, and translating it and explaining it. And so this is phonetic Japanese at its best, office door. And so now I can understand what this business process is, and I can drill down and ask it other questions. It's picking up details like this timer is set to unlock at 9 o'clock. I can do other things like, I'll ask it to explain this in French. And so we can, there's a lot of things that we get from being able to use these AI engines on BPMN, which they're already trained to do. Going forward, it would be nice to train the engines on the specific flows for Apex syntax and get some help in model creation. The engines are not quite able to put these diagrams together yet. They're getting close. They're much better now than they were at the beginning of this year. So I'm hoping that soon that will be good. I'm using GPT-4 here, which seems to give me the best results. But that's the Gen AI support we've got in the model. So to summarize, the Enterprise Edition is going to be a feature from now onwards. The first additional features we're adding in the Enterprise Edition are support for iterations and loops, full implementation of message flow and process collaboration, and the generative AI support that I've shown you. And for those customers who've got production applications, want support, then the Enterprise Edition will come with support and a day of advisory or training support every year. The Enterprise Edition will be available within the next week or so, and by which time there'll also be a website up on flowquest.net explaining everything. But in the meantime, please email me with any questions. So hopefully we've shown you the new features that are coming along in Apex 24.1. I just want to end by thanking all of the people on the Flows team, the core members that you haven't heard from today: Moritz, Dennis, Louis, and Jorg, and Solicon, Hyand, and Insum for their support. And I should also say a big thanks to Oracle, without whom we wouldn't have got to where we are now. So with that, I think we want to open it up to questions.
Yeah, there's one question regarding some confusion maybe between Apex and Flows for Apex. I guess Mark want to answer that question.
Oh, sure, I can address that. So what we've been covering here today is this open source framework Flows for Apex, which is on top of Oracle Apex. So you can download Flows for Apex from the Flows for Apex website. There's also the Enterprise Edition that Richard covered. But this is something that you install on top of Apex to do workflow. Apex itself, of course, is our product, Oracle Apex. Both have currently the version 24.1, right? There's Flows for Apex version 24.1, and there's Apex 24.1. So if you are looking for Apex, you go to the Oracle website, you can download Apex from there. You can run Apex on the cloud on apexoracle.com. And then in addition to that, there is the Flows for Apex framework that you can run on top of Apex. Hopefully that helps clarify a few things.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mark. There was also another question regarding AI. Can we actually generate process models using AI? Is this something, Richard, you can address?
I've tried. It's getting close. The results I can get now are much better than the ones I could get at the beginning of this year. It seems that AI is quite good at being able to tell you how to come up with the model, but actually producing the model, producing the diagram, it seems to then struggle with. When it comes to producing diagrams, GPT is ahead of Cohere, is ahead of some of the other models. I'm hoping that fairly soon we should be able to generate stuff, but it's not quite there yet in any way that's you end up getting half a GP, you end up getting the layout almost there, but it's wrong, and spending quite a lot of time splicing BPMN files together to try and prove that you can produce a diagram. It's not quite ready for runtime, for real time. We're getting there.
All right, perfect. I see that there were a lot of questions in the Q&A. Nearly all of them were covered already. I guess for the Enterprise Edition, people should contact you, Richard, directly by mail. And as you said, you would also put up a website. I guess that will also then include the costs involved for getting the Enterprise Edition, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so thanks again to all our sponsors here, but also the contributors for this release, especially Uwe, who did a great job doing the JSON plugin, and also Sajad, who was working on the simple form builder, and also Bach, who worked on the app, the simple process starter, alongside the core team that has done a tremendous job pulling this all off. Software development, I can assure you, is not easy. There are a lot of things you need to cover. It takes a lot of time. But yeah, it's great that we actually made it now. Today, 24.1 is available for download. So check it out, install it on your on-premises environment or on apex.oracle.com. And please let us know what you think about it, and also what you're doing with Flows for Apex. That's valuable input. If you're able to send us your process model you are using, that would greatly help us, and we would be happy to reference that in other discussions we might have. So with that, I guess we can conclude this session. Thank you all for your time.
Right,
Mark, any
Niels.
final words?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Niels. Thank you, Richard. And thank you, everybody on the team. That was a great session today. Learned a lot. So thanks for showing this to us. And again, our next Apex Office Hours will be in 2 weeks. And we're going to talk about template components in Apex there. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.